Having done the 5-minute seminar presentation, and that presentation is not what I did over the summer, it's your dissertation in miniature. So you give in 5 minutes an introduction where you say what the purpose of it is. You give an account of each chapter saying what the purpose of the chapter is, what evidence is considered, and what interim conclusions you believe you are likely to find. It won't be complete. There are going to be gaps, and of course in the presentation you could just say, and I don't know what I'm going to find out here. That's absolutely fine. But to have some sense of the shape of it. This is how the mirror test works, because sometimes it is apparent that it doesn't now correspond to what it is that you wanted to do. In the light of feedback from that, you then crack on and produce a full first draft. Notice here, this is called a full first draft. It is not called a rough draft, and that's absolutely deliberate. With every piece of work that you've ever submitted for VMC, you've submitted the work, we have read it, and then we've given you some feedback to indicate what's good about it, what's not so good about it, and what you might do for the future. We do this with the first draft, but we do it in such detail that it's the biggest bit of feedback you will ever get out of us. You submit your full first draft, we go through it page by page, line by line, marking it up, indicating if there's, supposing the standard of your spelling or grammar is not really the sort of thing that ought to be in there. We might mark up a whole page to show you the scale of the thing that needs to be attended to and suggest that you find somebody to help you with that. If there's some gap in the argument, if there's something illogical, we will indicate that on the page. And we might do that digitally, or we might do it on paper. If you submit a digital version, we can always do the annotations digitally as well. That's a perfectly good way of doing it. It works quite well. And we will also give you feedback against the 3 criteria which your dissertation will be assessed against. And you're familiar with those. 40% for research, 40% for analysis, 20% for communication. And then the what to do bit, which is probably the most important part of it, indicates what you could reasonably and practically do between the time that you've submitted that draft, and you'll get the feedback in November, and the deadline of Friday the 29th of January. So it's practical advice. If anything, that first draft stage is the most important stage of the whole process. Because only if we see what you're planning to do, and it's as full as it can we give you meaningful feedback. Occasionally do come in, have a brief. It's quite big. The draft. It's in your interest to make it as close to your best first version as you can, because then we can give you really meaningful feedback about how to make it better. Every year, 1 or 2 people submit a couple of pages and then just steam on right to the end. I can guarantee you that their work, even if, I don't know, people are of different abilities, irrespective of the standard or ability that somebody might have, without that stage, they cannot do the improvements. They cannot make the thing the best acquittal, if you like, of what you're capable of. So that draft is really important. And then you spend the time afterwards improving it and getting it to its final state. Is everybody clear about the shape of that? Okay? Right. Now, I'm going to talk about the first stage of this, which is the one that you're going to be engaged on from today, and which you'll be submitting on the 5th of May, and that's completing the dissertation proposal form. Okay. These stages, I've encouraged you to go through them when you've been thinking about the last 2 pieces of written work that you've been doing. So again, they'll be familiar to you, but they still apply. Right. Preparing your dissertation proposal. you have to have the proposal approved. Okay? If it isn't approved, it'll be sent back to you and you must resubmit it before you go away for the summer. This is just so that you can be confident and we can be confident that you have a practical plan of what it is you're going to do. If you submit a proposal, and I'm not threatening you with this, I'm just saying, if you submit something that doesn't actually make sense, it would be madness for us to say, yeah, go ahead, because you'd come a cropper. So you make it as logical as you can and as coherent as you can. Helping you develop as a practitioner, something of real interest. And also, this is your opportunity to establish that there's going to be the research material out there to support the work that you're going to do. The dissertation proposal form consists of a section which asks you to specify what your main research question is. You know, it's the answer to the question, what is your work about? And you say, it's asking the question, deduct something. Under that, the other questions that you'll need to ask in order to answer that main question. So far, so familiar. The next section asks you to specify any books, magazines, journals, text sources that you think are going to be useful. You don't have to have read them, obviously not, but you just need to have established that they're there. The next section asks you to specify some websites. It's inevitable you're going to be using websites. Why wouldn't you? It then asks you to pick 4 text sources and very briefly say, not what's in them, but how they can help you answer that question. You're looking troubled. Is this not making sense? No? Serenely making sense. Good. And then the final bit, which is an absolutely critical bit and which often poses problems, so we'll come back to that in a moment, and that's your structure. What type of structure are you going to use? What structure will enable you to answer the questions that you've set out? Now, we've had a look at structures earlier this year. That guide, the Guide to Successful Writing, is available on Blackboard. I'd encourage you to go and look at it again before you complete the dissertation proposal form. The dissertation proposal form is also on Blackboard and can be downloaded. Right. Here's an illustration. The reason for getting, you know that you must be weary of it, but there we are. I'm just going to say it again. The precise research question, having a question that is real, that you can answer, is the absolute foundation of any good piece of work. That's why we spend time on trying to get you to refine your research question now. Because if you have a precise research question, you know what you're doing. You have a limited amount of energy. This is just, the way life is. You've got other competing demands on your time. Not least the rest of your studio work, which rightly should take up most of your time. If you're doing something that's closely allied to that, then the chances are the sorts of things you're finding out in order to support your studio work may also be supporting your dissertation. It's quite likely. But given the limits on the time that you have available, the clearer you are about what it is you are doing, the less likely you will be putting energy into activities that isn't actually going to help. So getting a clear question is the foundation. It also helps you develop your structure, because if you know what you're doing, you can choose a structure that will enable you to answer the question. There's an illustration.